Alright, we're obviously not shelling corn today. See, last time we saw you was Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. And it was raining. And then yesterday, it wasn't supposed to rain, and it ended up raining most of the day. And then today was kind of nasty, foggy morning, and then it hasn't really improved. And I could go shell corn right now. The corn itself, getting it through the combine wouldn't be a problem. The stalks are tough, but I mean, it ain't any worse than what I've been shelling in the last few days. But it's so damn wet in between the back of that field and the road that I would never get it carted out to the trucks to get it off the field, because the lane is standing full of water big time. So I opted to just let it ride, and we'll see what happens. We got a 50% chance of snow tomorrow, and then Monday it's supposed to get down below freezing, I guess New Year's night. And then so we'll just have to see how things play out, and maybe Monday, sorry, did I say Monday night? Sunday night, tomorrow night, it's supposed to get down below freezing, so hopefully that puts a crust on it, and maybe Monday we can do something with it. We'll see. That ground's so saturated out there that it's going to take forever for it to actually freeze, but if it can at least get a crust on it, that'll help. Like, I'm not scared of the combine. The combine will go just fine. It's getting it out to the road that's going to be a problem, unless you want to track every stinking hopper all the way across that 40 acres to get it in a truck. So anyhow, I figured today, since I couldn't do any running, and since we're on the subject of wet falls, it'd be a good time for a story time, and it involves an Oliver combine, so we got a double whammy. So for your base knowledge, this, hold on, let me get this out of the sleeve so it's not so glary. Okay, it might still be a little glary because this is some waxy paper, but anyhow, this, if it'll focus any better, is an Oliver Model 40 rice combine. I'm sorry I can't get you a better picture. I looked online and I found one picture of a dilapidated, rusted out carcass of one sitting somewhere that somebody has on Pinterest, but it wasn't a great picture. And unfortunately, I don't have an actual Model 40 combine brochure. This is on the back of one of my Model 18 brochures. So this is what we got to work with, but this is enough of a visual aid to get you to know what you need to know. So this is a standard Oliver Model 40 combine. It was the biggest one Oliver made at the time. And then you've got this guy, which is a rice special. And they actually made two rice specials. They made one that was on rice and canes, which I actually think that's what that one is, because if the camera doesn't show it real well, but if you look at the tires, that's got rice tires on it. So I'm wondering if that one's actually a rice special, just shelling corn. But anyhow, this is the heavy duty rice special on full tracks. There's no steer axle, nothing. They skipped right over the half track and they went full tracks. The part that I find interesting about this is if you look at the crawler frame on it, even though at this time Oliver was still building combines in Battle Creek, because they didn't start building combines in Brantford until the purchase would have taken place in what, 62 or 63. I always get the Moline and the Cockshut purchase mixed up. But anyway, they didn't really start building combines in Canada until late 62, 63, whenever the heck it was. I'll go back and just so nobody bitches at me, let me look real quick. Okay, Cockshut bought January 62. So Moline was bought in 63. I always get those two mixed up. I don't know why. It's one of them things where if you don't think about it every day, you get them mixed up. But anyhow, so at this time, they were still building them in Battle Creek. And at this time, actually by 1960, that might have been the year that they moved. They shut down the cleat track plant in Cleveland and moved crawler production to Charles City. But anyhow, at this point, they still had the cleat track division, but it doesn't appear, looking at that undercarriage, that they actually used any cleat track parts, because there's nothing that looks cleat track about it at all. So I found that odd about the 40 Rice Combine, is it doesn't actually appear that they used cleat track parts on the undercarriage, even though they built crawlers. So anyhow, so Model 40 Rice Combine, obviously the two big differences between that and the standard are the full tracks, which they don't look that long in the picture, but you've got to remember that a Model 40 Combine, as with most combines back in the mid to late 50s when that design came out, actually the Model 40 is the big brother of the Model 33, which came out in 51, 52, somewhere. Either way, those early 50s combines were super long to begin with. So that combine's like 18 feet long, so those tracks are like 10, 11 feet long, even though they don't look like it in the picture. So you got the tracks. It's obviously brake steering, and supposedly, and since I don't have a Model 40 brochure, I cannot confirm nor deny this. Supposedly, the Rice Combine, the engine spun faster and it had more horsepower to help turn the tracks. But like I say, I can either confirm nor deny that. So that's the two major differences, is the tracks and the engine. So there's your background as... Oop. Hold on. Sorry, too much going on. So anyhow, that's for the story. We have to go back to the fall/winter of 1961-62. Apparently, that was an incredibly wet fall around here. Even worse than what we have now, to the point where any low ground around here had anywhere between an inch and a foot or more of water standing in it that would not go away. And obviously back then, you're still in the era where most guys were still running pull-type pickers and pull-type combines, and the self-propelleds were kind of just coming on the scene. So nobody could get over any ground around here. Anybody that had self-propelled combines was getting stuck. Corn pickers and pull-type combines, forget it. Anybody that had crawler tractors was making buku bucks doing custom work, because they were the only ones that could get across any ground. And it got to the point where one of the farmers that lived out north of town here went down to the dealership, went down to Robert James Implement here in town, which was our Oliver dealer, and ordered one of these combines brand spanking new. And they drove over to Battle Creek, loaded it up on their truck, and brought it here. And he said once it got delivered to their farm, it basically started, drove off the truck, and didn't shut off until harvest got done. And he said they didn't get done until end of January, beginning of February. So we bought the Rice Combine with the corn head. I'd be willing to bet it was probably the only one sold in the state of Michigan, because I can't believe that there was that many guys would have shelled out that kind of cash unless they were super desperate. I could be wrong. There could have been more sold around here, but I highly doubt it, because I highly doubt there were many sold to begin with, especially not with corn heads. But basically, he bought it, and in the first year, or that first fall he ran it, he got done with his stuff and then paid for the combine with the custom work he did getting everybody else's corn off because nobody else could get to it. And the entire time he owned that combine, they only ever got it stuck twice. And both times it got itself out without any digging. Basically what it came down to was there was so much water standing in the fields that at night it would freeze over. And the combine was so light-footed because those, I can't remember, those grousers are, I think the grousers on these were like 30 inches wide plus however long, that 10, 11 feet long, however long they were. And the combines weren't that heavy to begin with back then. It was so light-footed that it would stay on top of the ice in the mornings when they were running. And there was a few days where it would get warm enough when the sun came out by about 10, 11 o'clock that 2 times they actually had it fall through the ice. And the combine didn't have enough horsepower to push itself through and keep breaking the ice ahead of it. So what they had to do was once it fell through, they would just park it there and come back a few hours later once the ice had thawed, and they could keep right on picking. And several times they were picking in water so deep because on these, the engine sits down here side saddle in between the front and rear axles down low. There were a lot of times they were picking where the water was so deep, they would have to grease the distributor and spark plug wires to keep the ignition from shorting out. And they would actually take the fan belt off because they were in water deep enough that it would get up into the fan and start throwing water everywhere from the fan. And it was cold enough that if they just took the fan belt off and let the fan just coast through the water, the engine would still stay cool. And it was, the water was just hurt. He said they could keep picking as long as the water stayed outside the combine. He said there were several times where the water got deep enough it would actually go up inside the combine and they had to quit. But the water was so deep that basically they would set the snouts just inside the water, or just down under the surface of the water. And the ears were just high enough that they could get the ears in without having to run the head down in the water. And when they were picking on ice, the ears were just far enough on top of the ice that they would actually take the head, set it all the way down on the ice, and just let the snouts fold as far back as they would go. And that would just get the ears to where they could get them inside the head and keep picking. So they used it in that fall winter of 61, 62. And then it didn't get used again because they were actually an all red farm, still are to this day. And there was another fall in, it seems like it was the mid to late 70s. They got it out and had to use it again for corn. And then after that, it got parked out in the cow pasture and sat there for years, and the cows had their way with it, and the combine got beat to crap from the cows rubbing on it and ripping stuff off and yada yada yada. And Dad tried for years to buy that combine. At the very end, before it finally went to scrap, Dad was up to Dad had offered him $2,500 for the combine, and there was nothing left of the combine. Basically, all Dad wanted was the undercarriage and all the associated crawler conversion parts. And there was a junkyard just south of here that around that same time frame had just brought in a pristine barn find Model 40 that ran. They drove it into the yard. And what Dad wanted to do was buy that combine, take the crawler conversion parts off of it, get that wheeled machine, and set it on the crawler undercarriage and make a rice combine out of the two. But Dad said the guy would never sell it to him, and eventually it just disappeared, and Dad could never get him to say what happened to it. And finally, here just a couple years ago, Dad finally got the guy's son to fess up that it indeed had gone to scrap. which back then he probably didn't get anywhere near the $2,500 for scrap that Dad had offered him to buy it. So, and for all intents and purposes, when it parked it, it was basically a brand new combine because it only had about 2 seasons running. They might have got it out here and there in between those 2 wet falls to get some wet spots, because they farmed a big chunk of muck ground down around where I have my muck. But its two big use seasons was that first year they bought it, 61, 62, and then there that one time later in the 70s. So sorry, it was a little... I'm not real good at storytelling like this, especially when the story I'm telling is like third hand, but I figured it was a good little relevant story since we're talking about, or since we're in the middle of a really wet fall. Actually, we're in a really wet winter now. So anyhow, and if by some miracle anybody ever finds one of these, even if the combine's junk, if it's got all the crawler components, let me know, because I want one, and we're going to do the same thing, because finding Model 40s that are in decent shape, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not super difficult. And if I can find it, if we can find a rice combine that's got all the crawler parts still on it, and then find a good Model 40 for a donor to do the conversion, we can make a rice combine out of 2 combines. You need the rice combine as the main organ donor for all the parts. So anyhow, that's my story for today, since we couldn't do anything else. So I guess that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.